This video is going to be a really hard dose of the truth as to where your money, your cash is really being spent. Because money and wealth, whether that is spending money, saving money, or giving money away, which is not always a bad thing, are either very difficult or very easy, depending on the life lessons you've learned, depending on who you listen to, and whether you apply certain strategies in your life. Now, it's easy to give away someone else's money. And if you're a government in power, then you control all the money. You print the money, you borrow the money, you spend the money, and of course, they give your money away. But this video is going to focus on, in part, where a lot of your money is going and what lessons we can learn along the way. So we'll come back to that in the second half of the video, but stick around for that. Let's take a look, first of all, at where some of the money is going in terms of asylum accommodation. I've spoken a lot about illegal migration, and with the usual caveat in my videos. By the way, we're here on my wealth channel, if that wasn't obvious. Please do subscribe to the channel. My first milestone is 40,000 subscribers, but I want to hit 100,000 on this channel. Please do subscribe, and thank you very much. So let's take a look. On this channel, I promised you I will go down rabbit holes and bring you brutally honest truths about where your money is going and what they're spending it on, etc. Let's take a look at the asylum accommodation service. Now, there are several types of accommodation. I've spoken before at great length on illegal migration to this country, and I'm not against all migration. I'm not even against granting people asylum who genuinely need it. I'm just take the cynical view that a vast majority of them probably don't, and they're here as economic migrants. But by the by, let's take a look at what they're really spending, and it's a lot worse than you think. It's worse than they thought, and it's worse than they predicted. Now, there are three types of asylum accommodation. There's initial accommodation, which is generally hostel or hotel accommodation. Then there is dispersed accommodation, which is just another way of saying houses and flats in an area in a town near you. And finally, contingency accommodation. That is when they've run out of space and they need more. So they take hotels and other sites such as ex-military bases as contingency. This is the first thing I will focus on because it wasn't going to be the first thing I'll focus on. But if I search up North Eye for a moment, you'll see this one pop up here. If I move it around so you can see it. This North Eye site here. You can see from this column here, it's unused. Now, unused, you say, why is it on the list? Well, it's on the list because they spent money on it. Now, here's where I say that, to the critics of mine, I'm not just against Labour. I'm against governments in general that are breaking promises to you, wasting your money, and generally not running the country properly. Now, why do I say that? Well, this particular doozy was back in 2023, so before Labour came along. This site, North Eye, was purchased despite, get this, despite clear warnings that the site required significant remediation work and it was not yet viable. The Home Office agreed to buy it anyway for £15.5 million of public money. And they agreed, just get this for added insult to injury, they agreed to pay the vendors more than double what they purchased the site for the year before. So let's get this straight. This is the first blow-up thing. I really can't get my head around this. They agree. This was under the Conservative government. The Home Office agreed to buy this site for £15.5 million that required significant remediation work. So it wasn't inhabitable anyway. They just decided to buy the site with a plan to do it up. They paid more than double what the vendors paid for it the year before, and it's not being used. It just boggles the mind. How on earth is this even a thing? It's unused, this site. There's the opening gambit for you. There's the opening thing here. But that's not the only one. Other sites have come under scrutiny as well. There's all sorts of former barracks and RAF bases and also other places that have come under scrutiny. I'm not even going to go into those in this video because that wasn't even the point. Now the point of this video really are the targets and what they've estimated they were going to spend, which is bad by itself, but you will not guess. Let me know in the comments as we go along what you think these estimates have gone up to. I told you I would go down these rabbit holes and dig these things out. This is public information. This is not difficult to find, but no one's talking about it. No one's really thinking about it. But I will highlight these things for you on this channel, as long as you subscribe. Right. Home Office original estimate for the total contract value, not adjusted for inflation. So this will go up by at least a few percent per year. This is for 10 years between 2019 and 2029. Their estimate was £4.5 billion with a B, 4.5 billion. Now, to get your head round this for a moment, most people think £1,000 is a lot of money and £10,000 is a lot of money and £100,000 is really a lot of money. Well, multiply that by 10, you've got £1 million. Well, of course, £1 million is a lot of money. £10 million is a lot of money. £100 million is an awful lot of money. Well, £1,000 million is 1 billion. And so they were estimating £4.5 billion for the 10-year period for asylum accommodation and support contracts. But that's not the end of the story. They've now adjusted this because they don't think that's right anymore. They've now adjusted this because they don't think that's right anymore. Guesses in the comments, please, what you think this has gone up to. £5 billion? £6 billion? Any guesses? Let me know in the comments what you think this has gone up to. Big reveal. Take a deep breath. Make sure you're sitting down. This estimate now for the 10-year period has gone up to £15.3 billion between Clear Springs, Serco and Mears. £7 billion of which going to the south, Clear Springs, and a bit going to Wales. £3.5 billion going to the Midlands with Serco and £2 billion going to the northwest with Serco. £1.5 billion with Mears in the northeast. Just over £500 million in Scotland and just under £500 million in Northern Ireland. I mean, I'm throwing these out there like just under £500 million. Remember, 0.4 billion, you just throw it out there, just under £500 million, 0.4 billion pounds. That's £400 million. Get your head around these figures. All of this totaling up here, 15.3 billion. That's 15,300 million. £15,300 million. 15.3 billion. It's absolutely astronomical. And when you look at the second column, it's nowhere near the first column, but when you look at the second column, the advice, issue reporting and eligibility contract, that alone is £229 million. This is absolutely outrageous. Now, at least we can say there with this document here that they are aware of the problems, they're aware of the concerns. Because when we look all the way down here, we can see that it says we are also concerned about the Home Office's ability to fulfill its duty to safeguard public money and tackle the backlog of asylum claims without pushing problems and costs elsewhere. For example, by taking up rental accommodation that is in short supply and in desperate need by local authorities, pushing up rents and leading to more and more people being temporarily housed outside their local area. It also remains to be seen how an already stretched courts and tribunal system will be able to cope with the likely growth in asylum appeals. You see, we've already got 70 or 80 something thousand cases in the backlog in the Crown Courts alone. But then this goes on to say it's simply unacceptable that we must repeat the statement from our 2024 report on asylum accommodation that the Home Office's excuse of needing to work at pace does not absolve it of its responsibilities to manage projects effectively and safeguard value for money. That we must restate this points to a dysfunctional culture at the Home Office in which value for money was a secondary concern. And frankly, on the face of it, it looks like it wasn't really a concern at all. Conclusions and recommendations. The Home Office rushed to spend public money in trying to reduce the costs of supporting asylum seekers, but has very little to show for its efforts. In other words, it spent millions upon millions of pounds on sites that it doesn't use and the dispersal accommodation just to send them somewhere else, and now these costs are absolutely skyrocketing. Bearing in mind that this was published in February, but this one was published today. And all throughout this document, it talks about reducing the use of hotels to accommodate asylum seekers, reduce the costs of supporting asylum seekers, reduce its reliance on costly hotels. All the way through this document, it is emphasizing reducing the costs and the use of expensive accommodation. But that's where we come to the real lessons for this, because quite frankly, the government spends money, the government doesn't really save money, and the government certainly gives money away. Now, these are 3 lessons that we can all learn and take away from. Because let's say you've got things that you spend money on. There's ongoing spending, things that you want, there's things that you need, and there's things that you have to spend money on. So there are certain things that you just can't avoid. You need to be very careful about those. You need to plan those ahead. So if there are things that you have to spend money on, then they come first because you can't avoid those. They include the roof over your head and they include food that you put in your mouth. But then that is a variable because it depends where you live and it depends what you eat and what you spend the money on, whether you can really afford those things. And even when you save money, it depends where do you save the money. And you could be saving for money for things that you want and things that you need. But then, of course, where and how you save them, what accounts they are in, whether they are interest yielding accounts, whether you are sensible enough to have them in. For example, lots of people I speak to don't have an ISA account, even though they're trying to save money. They just keep it in a regular account. And then, of course, there's giving money away. That can be a sensible thing in some situations, but you can get carried away. For example, giving money to a charity, it depends really which charity it is. Do you trust the charity? Do you trust how the money is used and utilized? Or do you think the charity is wasting money? And if you're giving money to friends and family, is that a sensible way of doing it? Because invariably that might affect and taint the relationship you have with those, because then suddenly if you're giving the money away for a specific purpose, you may then resent what they actually spend it on. Or if they ask you for money for something really specific because they really need it, and so you give them that money, but then you see them spending a lot of money on something else that you think they don't really need, then suddenly you've got an interest in what they spend their money on, which might taint your relationship with them because you've given your hard-earned money to them for one thing, and then you see them spending money on something else. That might then lead you to think, well, hang on, I've given you money for this because I felt like you really needed that, but actually they're then buying something else. Are they really using the money you've given them for the right thing? And the same, of course, is true if you spend money and buy something for somebody. You can resent somebody if you've spent money to buy them something and then you see them either not using it, wasting it, or spending money on something else, etc. But when it comes to governments and they're spending money and giving money away, such as my previous video, they are literally giving money away, unconditional cash injections to people around the world, despite the little rabbit hole that I went down, really terrible rabbit hole I went down, but check out my previous video if you want to watch that. But what governments might end up doing then is just printing more money or borrowing more money, and all of which might cause lots of trouble, but then they might leave that trouble behind because if they're only in power for a few years, because if things don't work out, essentially they just leave the trouble behind. And invariably, the new government will blame the old government, and we've seen this time and time again for decades. They'll just blame the previous government for the mess that they left behind, and that they've got to try to clear it up, only then to go on and make their own mistakes. And so the mistakes that we've got here, with great respect to anybody that is genuinely seeking asylum from a war-torn country, etc., there are the arguments that they come from France and that's not a war-torn country and they should go back to France. Those arguments aside from the people that we should genuinely help, these numbers have absolutely gone through the roof, rocketing the costs. As you see here, the distribution of people seeking asylum across the country, the number of people seeking asylum who are accommodated by the Home Office increased by 134% between 2019 and 2024, from around 47,000 to 110,000 people. This is due to an increase in people entering the UK by the Channel and a rise in people claiming asylum who've previously been detained under the Legal Migration Act 2023. And so then we look at how they are housed and where they are housed. And as you can see from this diagram here, they are even eligible for accommodation in this one here if they are unsuccessful in their asylum claim, but they remain destitute. And so long as they show that they are taking steps to leave the UK, whatever that's supposed to mean, then they can stay in accommodation or they might be detained before they are removed. So at some point, one does have to ask the question, who is it that's making all the money here? Because we are talking about many, many billions of pounds. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. I did tell you I would be brutally honest about the wealth and the finance, the cash and the money, where it's going and how it's being spent. But Hopefully we can all learn some lessons along the way. Leave me your thoughts and comments. Please do subscribe to the channel for more brutally honest expose of where your money's going and what's happening. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.